Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We are from the Marx group. Today we are going to discuss Marxist theory. But before that, let me introduce our members first. The first is IFTINAN Putri SAFANA with ID number 19320073. The next is RIZKY PRATIWI with ID number 19320075. And then Anggrahita NIKEN PRATIWI with ID number 19320079. Wilma AFRILIA RIZKY with ID number 19320128, and then the last is Alfina Putri DAMAYANTI with ID number 19320131. And in this presentation, we are going to discuss 4 chapters, namely Introduction to Marxism, Key Concept, Figures of Marxism, and how to apply Marxist theory in literary work. So, ladies and gentlemen, coming to the first chapter, namely Introduction to Marxism. Well, in this chapter, I would like to divide it into 2 subchapters, namely Marxist theory and Marxist literary criticism. Okay, for the first subchapter is Marxist theory. Marxism is a school of thought developed by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. They have the premise that economics can determine politics or human thought. In other words, the economy shapes human life. Furthermore, the economy itself is determined by class conflict. Class in Marxism is divided into 2, namely proletariat and bourgeois. The proletariat are those who have skills but do not have the means of medium of work. Thus, they sold their labor to the bourgeois. Then, the bourgeois are those who have the means of production. Class conflict occurs between the 2 classes because of the gap. The gap occurs because the proletariat is very dependent on the bourgeois. If the proletariat does not work well or does not obey the bourgeois, they will easily be replaced and become unemployed. Meanwhile, on the other hand, if the bourgeois does not pay well for the proletariat, for example, then they are irreplaceable because after all, they are the owners of the capital. So from that, we can see, ladies and gentlemen, that it can be said that industrial technical advances can sharpen class conflict. Okay, well, back to the beginning, that economy shapes human life. This is because the economy is a capital to give power to the bourgeois to control the superstructure. This means that they can also control working class people in terms of religion, politics, and so on and so forth. Well, related to the explanation, the previous explanation, there are 2 key terms that must be understood, namely infrastructure and also superstructure. Infrastructures refers to the productive forces or material basis or economy, and it forms the basis of life process and also legitimized power. Legitimizing power here means being able to claim the result of the work of the workers as their own. For example, a factory owner will say that his quality products is his, even though it is made by using the skill of the workers. This certainly can alienate the proletariat from the products they made. Next is the superstructure. Superstructures refers to the real social consciousness, for example, as art, literature, and also religion. All of this is controlled by infrastructures, which means that those 3 things can be used for the benefits of the bourgeois. For example, in the capitalist pyramid, religion is symbolized by clergy, right? They are controlled by the ruler to fool the people under them. For example, by saying you have to be patient in your poor condition because you will be rewarded with heaven by God. Well, because of such condition, Karl Marx think that religion is an opium. Okay, so coming to the second subchapters, namely Marxist literary criticism. So, ladies and gentlemen, from the previous explanation, we know that Marxism as a fundamental theory is predicated on the possibilities of social style of thinking that addresses a wide range of monetary concern, distributive imbalance, social classes, and political transformation. Moreover, in criticizing a literary work, we may apply Marxist critics. Well, according to Terry Eagleton, he is a leading British literary theorist. Marxist criticism is concerned with how novels are published and whether they mention the working class or not. It is also concerned with the form, style, and meaning. Marxist criticism focuses on the story's class division, political context, oppression, and class struggle. To put it another way, this criticism is more concerned with the social and political dimension of a work than with its aesthetic merit. Well, furthermore, the first major Marxist critics came from George Lucas, 1995 to 1971, who proposed reflectionism. Well, reflectionism is considered as a vulgar Marxism. Vulgar Marxism is the idea of the relationship between base and superstructure to a universal law describing human society. So the point is here, reflectionism is to be said as vulgar Marxism because it is describe the relationship between the infrastructure and the superstructure. The superstructure here means the literary work. So in more detail, reflection is an assumption that a text will reflect the society that has produced it. The reflectionists use it for the purpose of discovering how characters and their relationship typify and reveal class conflict, the socio-economic system, or the politics of time and place. Furthermore, there are several views of Marxist figures on literary works, namely Karl Marx, Engels, Plekhanov, and Tolstoy. Well, Karl Marx believed that literature must be based on socio-historical reality, and socio-historical reality is characterized by class struggle. So literature must be placed within the framework of the proletarian class struggle in order to eliminate class. And then the next is Engels and Plekhanov. Well, they have the same thought, namely literature is a reflection of society, but still has an aesthetic side. The more hidden the messages, it will be better. In other words, they both considered the aesthetic side of the literature more important. And then the next is Tolstoy. Well, Tolstoy has the principle that art, for art's sake, must be uplifted because aesthetic is not important. Art must be monitor of propaganda of social process. Art must realistically convey the state of society. Art is a social interest or campaign that has no autonomy. So, from the explanation, we can say that Tolstoy's thoughts are the same as Marx. So, related to tools of social interest, ladies and gentlemen, art is not only used by the proletariat as their class struggle, but also by the bourgeois to instill or manipulate the proletariat to accept bourgeois ideology. This kind of thing is called interpolation. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's all from me. The next will be explained by the next presenter. Wilma Afrilia, time is yours.
Thank you, IFTINAN. Hello, I'm Wilma. As you can see on the screen, now I would like to talk about reading from a Marxist perspective. Alright, there are four main areas of study. The first is economic power. According to Marx, a society is shaped by its forces production. So, for those who owns the means of production can dictate what type of society it is. In Marxism, to explain any social, even or political context, we need to understand the economic condition underlying the society, or which is known as material circumstances, and the historical situation in which they occur. In capitalism, there are two main classes of society. The bourgeoisie are those who own property and control the means of production, and the proletariat are the workers controlled by the bourgeoisie and whose labor produce their wealth. Because the bourgeoisie have a power base, so they can manipulate politics, education, government, and all aspects of the culture. The economic of capitalism creates commodification. What is commodification? It is a desire for possession, not for their utility, but for their social value or power to impress others. So, in this commodification, the display of material object is a way of showing off one's wealth. It's such as buy a newer car or buy a second house. And commodification is also the bourgeoisie ways of oppressing the proletariat who wants to achieve the status symbol. Marx argues that the structure of human society consists of base and superstructure. Base is the methods of production, and the superstructure are the social, political, and ideological system and the institution that they generate. So the superstructure maintains the base, and the base shapes the superstructure. Right? Let's move to the next slide. Materialism versus spirituality. Marx argues that social values reflect material goals, not abstract ideals or spiritual, but it is created by cultural and social circumstances. The material world shows a reality in a society. For example, we can observe people live in social groups, the relationship among socioeconomic classes, and analyzing the superstructure and how the distribution of economic power undergirds the society. So, the quality of a person's life is not destroyed by spiritual failure, but by material failure. I will take the example from the short story by Guy de Maupassant entitled The Diamond Necklace. So, capitalistic system in her society generates Madame Loisel's desire for expensive objects. Then it leads her to borrow a diamond necklace from her friends, from the bourgeoisie. She thrived in material circumstances. But then she loses the diamond necklace. She too is lost because her relationship with her friends and for a return to the glittering world of the receptions lost because she had to pay off the debt. So the Madame Loisels is destroyed not by spiritual failure, but the economic system created a superstructure that not allow her to have a better life. Next area is class conflict. So the basic assumptions of Marxism is the forces of production. A capitalist society will inevitably experience conflict between its social classes created by the way economic resources are used and who profits from them. So there is a class management and labor. The bourgeoisie who control the means of production by owning the natural and human resources, and the proletariat who supply the labor that allows the owners to make a profit struggle against each other. So this constant conflict, or Marx called it dialectical materialism, is what instigates change. Dialectical materialism refers to the view that all change is the product of the struggle between opposites generated by contradictions inherent in all events, ideas, and movements. So, the dominant class, using its power to make the prevailing system seem to be logical, then it entraps the proletariat into holding the sense of identity and worth that the bourgeoisie wants them to hold. So it allows the powerful or the bourgeoisie to remain in control. Then the next slide is art, literature, and ideologies. So the dominant class creates an ideology that functions to secure its power. So by developing a false consciousness, they influence the people to accept unfavorable system for them without progress through art and literature. The bourgeoisie impose their value system on the proletariat. The, the art can make the current system attractive and logical, thus lulling the workers into an acceptance of it. So they make a manipulation. Next, the Marxist critics see literary work as a product of the socio-economic aspect of a particular culture, and also the work view of the author reflect the views of a group of people. So we need to pay attention on the depiction of inequalities and social classes, an imbalance of goods and power among people, or manipulation of the worker by the bourgeoisie, and show the injustice that society. Well, so that was a brief explanation on the four main areas of Marxism study. For the next material, Niken will talk about the sense of Marxism thought.
Okay, so now let's discuss about figures in Marxist criticism. And here there are two classes of uh, figures in Marxist criticism. The first is socialist realism, and the second is the Frankfurt School. The first that we are going to discuss is about socialist realism. Okay, socialist realism is a school. It is the term usually used to the state sanction of theory of art or literature, which is predominantly in the Soviet Union or known as Soviet socialist realism. It is under the political domination of Russia after the Stalinist period or the Second World War II. In this class, in socialist realism, there are two figures. The first is George Lucas, and the second is Bertolt Brecht. Now, let's start to discuss about George Lucas. The first is George Lucas. George Lucas is a Hungarian-born philosopher and critic, and be the most admired Marxist critics. As a Marxist critic, Lucas argued that the true realism didn't just depict the appearance of social world, rather than the truer, more complete, more vivid, and dynamic reflection of the reality. In his opinion, realist literary work like novel doesn't bring the illusion of reality instead of a uniqueness form of the reflection of reality. Next is Bertolt Brecht. As his name, he is a German-born playwright, and one of his most ideas is about alienation. At the time, it is known as Verfremdungseffekt, or literally mean as the effect of making strange. This term actually commonly known in the concept of defamiliarization or formalism, and in another source there's further explanation about this concept, alienation, which provides a strength effect, bringing the audience to be more interested either emotionally or psychologically to the characters in the play or anything else related to the play. By this concept, Brecht would like to show up the contradiction in capitalist society as something which is strange and unnatural, which requires changes. In Brecht theory, there is one aspect which brings him into a conflict with Lucas. It is about the rejection of formal unity in a literary work like the unity of time or places. Next, we are moving on to the Frankfurt School. The Frankfurt School is a school which is applied to a group of philosophers or thinkers or other discipline who were member or associated with the Institute in Social Research in Frankfurt am Main in Germany. In this school, there are several figures that will be discussed. The first is Theodor Adorno. Theodor Adorno is the leading and most influential writer on aesthetic in the Frankfurt School. He criticized Lucas' point of view, which claimed that the art or literature have to be able to have a direct relationship with reality. However, in Adorno's point of view, he claimed that either art or literature is separated from the reality, which is the source of its strength. The second is Walter Benjamin. Walter Benjamin is a maverick thinker. His best known essay is The World of art in the age of mechanical reproduction, in which in this book he argued that modern have to be able to bring a meaning as a process of reproducing a works of art, particularly in photography, film, and music too. In his opinion, Walter Benjamin also stated that works of literature used to be bring the quality of uniqueness which calls as aura. Next is Lucien Goldman. Lucien Goldman is a Romanian by birth but live in France, and he is the founding father of genetic structuralism, which owes much in structuralism. So, Lucien Goldman was interested in tracing the relationship between works of literature, predominantly modes of philosophical thought and ideology, and specific social classes. In his opinion, to understand the genetic literary works, you have to understand the relationship between the background of a writer, the background of writer, and social condition in society, which creates the literary, So it is Frankfurt theory, and the rest will be discussed by my friends. Thank you.
Alright, I'm Alfina and will continue to explain another important figure in the evolution of Marxism. Louis Althusser, 1918-1990. Louis Althusser is a French philosopher who studies the literature and culture of capitalist society along with ideology. He is commonly referred to as structural Marxist. Althusser agreed with his concept called interpellation, which means the working class is manipulated to accept the ideology of the dominant class. In a letter on art, Althusser considered art to be located somewhere between ideology and scientific knowledge. Althusser states literature and art can affect society and help us to have a critical understanding of the ideology in this society. For Althusser, ideology works through the state apparatus, which means all those institutions which help the ruling class to perpetuate the economic dominance. These include the political system, the law, the education, religion, and others. Althusser mentioned two important characteristics of the ideology. First, ideology expresses imaginary relationship to reality, and the second, society ideology primarily consists of the ideology of the dominant classes. Another figure is the Italian Marxist Antonio Gramsci. Gramsci is known for his theory of cultural hegemony, which describes how the state and ruling capitalist class, the bourgeoisie, use cultural institutions to maintain power in capitalist societies. In this case, those in power strongly spread the ideologies, norms, ideas, worldview, and behavior through social institutions such as school and the media to control the rest of society. Cultural hegemony functions by framing the worldview of the ruling class and the social and the economic structure, and then designed for the benefit of the ruling class. For Gramsci, it was possible for the individual to become aware of the dominance of hegemony and to resist its effect. Because under hegemony, the citizens of states have internalized what the rulers want them to believe, so they genuinely believe that they are expressing their own opinion. Another important influence on Marxist literary critics was Pierre Macquarie. In A Theory of Literary Production in 1966, Macquarie considers the literary text not as something created, but something as produced, and never completely aware of what it is doing. He regarded literary text as being pervaded by ideology, and it was the job of the critic to look for the weaknesses of the work. In order to reveal the ideology in a text, the critic must focus on what the text represses rather than overtly expresses. And next, Raymond Williams. Raymond Williams is the most influential Marxist critic of the 20th century. In Culture and Society, he defines culture as a whole way of life. He was establishing cultural studies as a discipline, and he's elaborate the concept like hegemony and ideology to help generation in analyzing cultural practices. William assumed that culture was bound up with economic and class. He developed the concept of cultural materialism, arguing that culture has a material effect. Williams views culture as a productive process. For him, the study of the literature would reflect the dominant value of the society. The next is the British critic Terry Eagleton. In Criticism and Ideology 1976, Eagleton concerned to find the cracks and contradiction in a text. Eagleton was interested not in what made a text coherent, but what made it incoherent. In Criticism and Ideology, he argued that a literary text is not merely an expression of the dominant ideology, but the production of ideology. Eagleton analyzed a number of canonical British novels, exploring the relationship between an ideology, for example Marxism, and literature. Well, currently one of the best-known Marxist critics are Frederick Jameson. In his Marxist and Form 1971, Jameson explored Marxist theories of literature, especially with reference to their dialectical aspect. Jameson is known for using Freudian concept of representation in practice of Marxist criticism. Jameson talked about the political unconsciousness, the exploitation and oppression buried in work.
Okay, so to apply any literary theory, especially in Marxism, there are two methods or two steps. The first is 1. Select the subject of analysis and theory to be used. Second, reading literary works that are pertinent to the theory and the subject matter we will be analyzed. 3. Use the concept we will be studying, analyze, and the theory to analyze literary work. So the first method is focusing or like in general in any literary theory. And there is the second step. So there are 3 steps. The first is reflecting at the social and political aspect. For example, like class division, class struggle, and oppression. That's the common in Marxism. And then select the topic for analysis and the theoretical framework to be applied. So in the second step, we can choose whether we want to talk about class division, class struggle, or oppression. So we will see in the literary works that we analyze, is there a class conflict? Apakah ada konflik di antara dua kelas tersebut? And the third is analyze the topic that we have chosen by answering some research questions such as where did the class conflict occur, or how does the author's socio-economic status affect his or her society, and like to consider how the work represents the history and the culture of the literary works. So these questions is quite important, or like it is a helpful question to answer the topic like class division, class struggle, or oppression. So for the example, in some literary work there will be about proletarian that got oppression from the upper class. So we look at the author's socio-economic, and then we found that he was proletarian. So that's why maybe that literary work happened. So that's how to apply a Marxist theory.